Should college athletes be paid? This question has dominated sports headlines for some time, and with the upcoming college football season just a few weeks away, we're sure to hear more about it. Gordon Voit, the sports director and lead anchor for Walkons TV and the Heisman Trophy voter, joins us again this week as we continue our conversation on the role that money has in athletics, college athletics specifically. All of that coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm your host, Sam Chen. The question that is being asked over and over again in college athletics: should our college athletes, our student athletes, be paid? Gordon Voit, who is the sports director and lead anchor of Walkons TV and a Heisman Trophy voter, joins us again this week. Gordon, thanks so much for being back.
Glad to be here, Sam. Let's talk about one of the most complicated issues in sports. Can't wait.
Complicated and controversial. Last week we talked about the role that finances and money play in college athletics in general. And you gave us a really good insight into some of the 30,000 foot level concepts and how they trickle down practically with different size schools, from the University of Texas to Lehigh Lafayette kind of school to the smaller Division I schools and so forth. But one of the debates, really where this money debate comes, besides recruiting, is it comes into the question of should our student athletes be paid? Summarize for us the situation and the arguments as they stand right now for and against it.
Wow, how much time do I have? 38 minutes? Just for this comment, I'm going to need all 38 minutes of those. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, the thing that's driving this is skyrocketing revenue in college sports. So we talked last week about how that's driven by one thing and one thing only, and that is TV rights. Those are incredibly valuable. The value is going up. Each Big Ten institution now receives more than $50 million once it reaches full vesting. Rutgers, Maryland, Nebraska are still in that transition phase. But with this increased revenue, people start asking questions like, wait, hold on, if Dabo Swinney and Jimbo Fisher and Jim Harbaugh are making $8 million or more a year, and students are still getting the same amount for scholarships, how is that fair? So that is the whole kind of the fuse of this debate bomb, is the money going way up, and people seeing these big gaudy numbers on SportsCenter and saying, wait, are the students getting this? The short answer, and this is something we can delve into more, and something that I typically point to, is that student athletes are getting compensated. Now, you could argue, are they getting the full value that they'd be able to negotiate as if this was a business? That's a different debate. But there are, in fact, scholarship. Obviously, it ranges if you go to Duke versus one of the smaller Division I public campuses in the SWAC or one of those small conferences. Big difference in cost of attendance there. But you're talking about upwards of $100,000 in expenses that the school is providing with that student athlete per year. So you're talking about nearly a $500,000 deal that 18-year-olds are signing with these institutions. So between tuition, obviously payment for tuition, that's the classic example. But now students even get a cost of living stipend, so that everything from travel to housing to meals is part of that financial aid package. That's something that's only come about in the last 5 years, is that students now get the full cost of attending a school as opposed to just the tuition money. So if you ask for an overview, you've got multiple forces in play here. You've got revenue going way up, salaries going way up for coaches, and people asking, is this money going to the students? Then NCAA argues, yes, it is going to the students. They're getting over $100,000 in benefits every single year. But then a lot of other people are saying, hold on one second, how is this fair that Zion Williamson is getting the same amount in terms of assets and benefits as somebody like me, who maybe was on the rowing team, for example? I did row for 2 years in high school, actually not in college, but somebody like me on the other end of the athletic spectrum was my point. So there's so many things at play, and this is something I'd like to really process with you here today,
Sure.
is that for some kids, the scholarship package, so the scholarship model that people like Oliver Luck say is fair, is an amazingly good deal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not going to be a professional athlete and you can graduate school with zero college debt,
Mm-hmm.
have that sort of stamp of that accolade, that degree, and hey, I played Division I college football, and all the other things that come with that. That is an amazing deal for somebody on one end of the spectrum, but for people like Zion Williamson, it is a tremendously bad deal. And if this was a free market, he would be negotiating way, way more
Sure.
than the $100,000 that he's getting from Duke, or that he got from Duke last year. So
Sure.
it boils down to it being a much, much different quality of deal for a very diverse group of student athletes.
Sure. Let me ask you this as a follow-up to that. You mentioned the $100,000 mark. How much of that, what is included in all that? I mean, this is a situation where we know they get a full scholarship. You have a full ride. You get your tuition covered. The room and board is also covered. Are meals covered? The travel expenses? What all is included in that?
Everything you just named, and then other things like academic aid. I mean, there's a cost associated with that. You need staff, you need facilities, and especially at the Division I level, and particularly at the Power 5, Power 6 level, that's an enormous cost. You're talking about giving academic aid to over 100 kids in football's case. So everything that you just mentioned right there, just the raw tuition dollars that actually do get paid to the university, I think that's kind of a weird practice for the athletic department. How can you transfer money to yourself? I think that's kind of a strange thing that schools do. Yeah, right. I'm gonna wire myself $100,000 on Venmo right now.
Only in college athletics.
Only in college athletics. Talking about, look, see, I got so excited that my wire popped out here. Don't get me fired up, Sam Chen. All right, we're good? We're good, okay. You're talking about tuition, room and board, meals, academic aid. I mean, think about this, too. You know, if you're Texas and you're squaring off against Oregon and Dallas or Louisiana, if you're LSU and Wisconsin squaring off the Lambeau Field, you're chartering a plane for about 80 people to 100 people. These are enormous costs associated with it. So the $100,000 mark, that it involves the total cost to the university. And that's, of course, a rough number because every school is different.
Sure.
Not every school is chartering flights like that.
Sure.
But for the Power 5, that is basically what you're doing. You're agreeing to a compensation package that is in kind. You've heard that term, monetary versus in kind.
Right.
And this is an in kind asset package of about $100,000 a year.
Right. Is any portion of that some kind of cash stipend to the student athlete?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be a lot of surprising to a lot of viewers out there, is that yes, people do just get a check. It's not like you have to tell them what apartment complex you're renting an apartment with and then they pay it directly. It's not like that. You basically just get a check every month for so much money, and then that is allocated in theory toward housing. So your apartment, the rent that you have to pay on that, your food, so you can go get groceries and things like that. And then the most recent addition to that, and something that came about with the famous Ed O'Bannon case and kind of that era of, hey, let's rethink this, was the total cost of living. So a lot of kids were like, well, guess what? I'm from South Central LA and I'm going to school in Maryland. This cost me like a lot of money. I hope you guys know that, like, I don't have, $1,500 to spend on a plane ticket and cost money for my family to come see me play. So how is that fair if I'm generating this revenue for your school and it's costing me money just to attend?
Yeah.
So that's the most recent advent, was the total cost of attendance as opposed to just tuition, room, and board. So they've expanded the scope. And I think eventually, right now it's like this, there's pressure building. They've agreed to a little bit more. And I think eventually when public opinion gets to a certain level, it's going to erupt and we're going to have a totally different system.
Sure. When we talk about paying college athletes, obviously no one is saying that every single college athlete should be paid. Even at Division I, with Division I and the big money or revenue generating programs such as college football, not every student athlete would be paid. Your people on your scout team are not going to be paid the same way as your starting quarterback or your left tackle or so forth.
Exactly.
How does that work right now with that $100,000 you're talking about? I mean, walk-ons, I'm assuming walk-ons don't have a package like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So walk-ons, you are paying your own tuition. A lot of them get academic aid. But in terms of the cost of the university, it costs them virtually the same amount to have a Zion Williamson as it does to have somebody at the end of the bench who's on scholarship, because they get the same amount of tuition. It doesn't cost Zion more to attend Duke than it does somebody else. His apartment costs the same, his food costs the same. Yeah, you might argue that maybe they need increased security at media events or fan events, things like that, but that's a very small difference. So yeah, in terms of the cost of the university, it is the exact same in theory for a Zion versus somebody at, say, Southern Mississippi, kind of a middle tier school, or at University of Illinois Chicago, a school in my state that's more on the lower end in terms of budget size and national prominence. So what's interesting is that they all get the same amount of money within that school. So what I think is an interesting way, I am more of a proponent of having a totally different system, but if you have to work within the confines of this current system, I think one strategy that helps both sides, so people like me who are not going to be pro athletes, who nobody knows about, who are not brands, who are maybe on let's say the wrestling team at Oregon State, you ask somebody in Miami about this athlete, they're not going to know about it.
Right.
A way to satisfy those people that are quote unquote anonymous people that are not brands and the national household names like Zion is to allow them to pursue more of what the model that they have in Olympics. In the Olympic model, you can make money off your likeness. You can do car commercials. You can do autograph sessions, and that's up to you. But as far as payment, there's no salary associated with that. Sure. So I think that's a brilliant solution to this, and I'm kind of shocked that they haven't already gone to that. This is the United States of America. Like, let somebody make money off of their likeness if they can. It just seems so archaic that we're saying, oh, you're not allowed to better yourself financially. And so what that does is it doesn't coerce schools into paying money that maybe they can't afford or can't afford. It just says, hey, if you're worth this, then shoot, go get it.
Yeah.
And that allows people like Zion to get a fair amount of money, and it prevents people like me from getting a salary or something silly like that, because I'm not a national brand as an athlete, and I don't deserve the same amount as Zion Williamson in terms of my athletic purchasing power or marketing power. So I think that having an Olympic model is a great solution for satisfying both.
Sure. That's an interesting perspective. Let's jump into that right when we come back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Gordon, when we left off, you were talking about potentially a different kind of model. Before we get into that, let's just quickly kind of redefine where the conversation's gone thus far. On the current model, student athletes get some form of scholarship package. Obviously, we're talking about those student athletes who get the scholarships, not walk-ons or Division III athletes. But this includes their tuition. This includes stipends for living, or for room and board, for meals, travel, and so forth. On the other end of it, there's just an argument saying, well, maybe some student athletes should be allowed to be paid. To your point, someone like a Zion Williamson at Duke, who's the #1 overall draft pick, is worth a lot more contract-wise than someone who's on the road team at Oregon State University. I don't even know if Oregon State has a road team.
Neither do I.
But go Beavers. And that's an interesting argument, and it certainly carries water. There's two sides of this, both that make some sense. But you brought up an interesting hybrid solution, which is really somewhat of a free market option to say, let them play that market and let them make money off of their likeness. And so Zion Williamson is signing autographs, and people are willing to pay for them. That's an option for him. Is that currently disallowed under NCAA regulations?
Yeah, you're not allowed to accept money or any kind of in-kind payment for your services, for your likeness. So if Zion Williamson were to go out and do a car commercial and get paid a certain amount by the Ford dealership in Raleigh, Durham, he would definitely get slapped with a violation, and Duke would potentially expose itself to a violation there. So he would be deemed ineligible in all likelihood.
Can student athletes hold jobs outside of what they do as athletes?
They can. They can hold jobs. So, in fact, I was talking to Eastern Illinois has a receiver that had 16 touchdowns last year, Alexander Hollins, who's in the Vikings training camp right now. And I was talking to him after the semester ended, and I was like, "Oh yeah, so are you just working out now?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a job at the gas station in town." And I kind of was like, "Wow, how do you have time for that?" But students are allowed to get jobs. And so I think that's a really interesting question for you to ask, because then what's to prevent somebody from getting a job at the Ford dealership,
right? And
then saying, "Oh, hey, by the way, it's a $4 million internship that you're going to be conducting," and you can kind of go through sort of back channels and paying somebody that way.
Sure. So they can have jobs, they can make money that way, but they can't make money off of their likeness or their autograph or their brand.
Exactly.
And to your point, when I was at Baylor, Robert Griffin III was there, Perry Jones III was there. A bunch of students made shirts. Neither Robert nor Perry did this. A bunch of students made shirts that said, "I plead the third," and the NCAA wrote a cease and desist letter saying this was basically making money off of their brand. Neither student athlete saw the money. Why do you think we should open the doors for this and say student athletes should be allowed to make money off of their brand?
I don't want to start to get into too much of a political discussion, but this is America. I mean, if you have some sort of talent or skill and it's safe, ethical, and productive, I don't see why we should be preventing people from pursuing that. I mean, if you have an amazing musical talent, you're allowed to make money. You could be a record label artist and perform all over the world, and be a college student. I don't see why we're prohibiting college athletes from doing that. Talents come in all different shapes and sizes, and I think that, again, if it's safe, ethical, and within the law, that we should be able to make money off our talents. So I just think it's kind of silly that we're artificially putting restraints on college students who have a very lucrative asset, their likeness, and they're not allowed to make money off it. It just seems very un-American to me, and it just doesn't fit step for step with our economic system.
Right. What is the reasoning behind the current ban for that? I mean, I understand the situation with boosters and recruiting, right? You don't want someone to say, "Hey, I'm going to play for the University of Florida because guy gave me a free car or guy put my parents up in a new apartment."
Right.
I understand that. But once they're there, once they're signed, once they're competing, to your point, if someone decides to model in college or decides to go on tour, and we see this with college students who are musically talented, or they decide in a modeling career and they can make money off of their brand or their image, what's the idea behind the restriction against athletes?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I think that maybe they need to keep up appearances and say, "Oh, this is an amateur model." Not to pick on Oliver Luck again, who's Andrew Luck's dad, who's been heavily involved with the college athletic landscape and has had an amazing career ranging from West Virginia's athletic director to a position with the NCAA. He had a comment when he was pressed on this very topic, and he said that, if students are going to start to operate within an employee-employer mindset within a university, that it'll distract them from their studies. So that seems to be the only argument from the NCAA why they don't have this, is that, these are amateurs, we're embracing amateurism, and that means that you don't get money for things. That's not how I would do it if I was in charge, and that's why I'm not in charge of the NCAA, because I favor much more of a free market approach, especially in 2019. I mean, young people, even at 18, 19, I mean, they are potentially businesses, and they're already operating like that. And that's why you've seen this black market open up around recruiting. It's because people are brands, people are assets now, and we're restricting that. And so naturally, black markets operate in the shadows where things aren't allowed to flow freely.
You said earlier your concern with the model as it's set up now is that someone like a Zion Williamson can clearly make more money, is worth more as an athlete and a brand than someone, as we say, on the road team at Oregon State, for example.
Well, the rowing team at Oregon State is not going to like us after this
segment. No, they're
not. Guys, just an example.
But what's the concern from where you sit, from what you see? What is the concern with the other side, which is saying, let's just pay our student athletes instead of the university saying, hey, here's a scholarship offer. The university says, hey, Zion, we're going to pay for everything. On top of that, we're going to add $20,000 for every year that you play at Duke. What's the downside of that? What are the caveats there?
For the student athletes, I don't see any downside. For the school, it means that they'll have an extra expense, which they obviously don't want to incur. But as for the legal ramifications, or I don't know if tax status would be in jeopardy, I doubt it, because universities pay people every day to run their college campuses. What's the difference between paying a student for services versus paying a professor for services? So I don't think that would affect, say, the nonprofit tax status that universities hold. So I don't see how that could be a hurdle. To be honest with you, they just don't want to pay the money. I mean, they sort of hide behind this. It's amateurism. And I do think there's a lot of merits to the honest pursuit of academics. But I don't see how that would be corrupted by paying students out of money that they're generating. It just doesn't seem to be, but I'm actually not in favor of that. I don't know if you want to get into this now, but I have a much different view of that. I don't think we should be telling the NCAA what to do, but I think that we need to let competition and choice drive up the incentive package for students, and you can't do that when you have one route to get to the pros, especially in football, and that's through college football. I think we need to give people more options. I don't know if you want to get into that now. We can do that later.
Well, let's go ahead. We have a little bit of time here. What other options would there be for someone playing college football, for example?
So it's amazing that we're offering students free tuition to study history or engineering at the college level. But if you want to be a professional football player, you don't necessarily want to go be studying European history. And so I think it's a little silly that we force people down one path. There's absolutely no minor league option or a training program where talented 18-year-olds can go develop and work on their job skills. Basically, I mean, if you're talking about strength, mental acuity at the quarterback position especially, these are job skills. It's no different than teaching somebody welding or how to run a spreadsheet if they're going to be a CPA later on in life. There's absolutely no other routes. We're forcing everybody down this one path. You have to go study European history to become a tight end in the NFL. That just seems silly to me. I love the model that the NCAA has where they say, this is an amateur model. We're going to provide you with a scholarship package, travel, room, and board, and you can come study, get a university degree, and reap all the benefits of the national exposure of being on ESPN. I love that they have that. They should not be coerced out of that because for a lot of students, that's what they want to do. But the problem is people like Zion Williamson don't necessarily want to go study European history. They need to be given another route, another viable path to work on their job skills to get to the NBA. And the NFL is particularly problematic because there absolutely is no second option. With basketball, it's really exciting because we are seeing a lot of progress. There are a multitude of different leagues. Some of the top prospects are now going to Australia and making $1 million or $2 million a year. Brandon Jennings was one of the first pioneers. I believe he went over to China instead of playing his freshman year of college. So people are bypassing the college system, which I think is a good thing because some kids like me, I loved college. I loved studying. I loved talking about European history. But not everybody's like that. And some people, like we saw Darius Baisley, who was a commit to Syracuse, accepted a $1 million internship with New Balance. And so he went and studied something that interested him, which was shoe design. And he just basically worked out with a private trainer. And that was a good path for him. So I wish that football would have a similar model. Because I think that ultimately that will be, we know with our economy that choice is always a better option. It's bad for Americans if we have one company selling us bread. They can charge whatever they want. They can lower the quality. But if you have multiple bread companies competing, then all of a sudden that's better for the consumer, better quality, better price. It's the same thing with college athletics. If you have one route, the NCAA dictating all of the terms. Well, guess what? That's going to be a really, really bad deal for some of the top athletes in the country. So I think we need to give elite quarterbacks and running backs and receivers all over the country that are in high school that don't want to go study European history. We need to give them some sort of other route so that the NCAA can keep doing what it wants. And you know what? If there is money to be made off of these high school athletes and college athletes, then some other entity should sprout up and offered it to them. And I hate to bring up LeVar Ball, but he's one of the first people to actually pursue that with the JBA, which is now, I think, defunct.
Right.
But promising high school athletes a route where they can make money. So I know that's a very complicated topic. Choice is a great thing, and I wish football would embrace it.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. And again, Gordon, thank you for taking the time to join us. We've got just a few seconds left here. So let me ask you, you are a Heisman Trophy winner. We asked you this last year. We'll ask you again. Who is your pick to bring home the Heisman this upcoming season?
So I think Trevor Lawrence from Clemson is in an incredibly good position. He's the odds-on favorite in Vegas to win it. Got the size, the arm talent to make big things happen. Jalen Hurts transferring to Oklahoma. That will be very interesting, too. And Taylor Martinez from Nebraska is, I think, one of the top dark horse candidates.
That's great. Well, Gordon, thank you again for joining us, and thanks to our viewers for tuning in. That is all the time we have tonight. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.